It's that time again. Work continues apace on our project car, so let's update and see where we've got to. Day 3. We had a late one last night at the end of day 2, you might tell from the state of me, and also from the state of our car, which is actually starting to look a little bit like a car. Now, everybody here was frantically telling me, don't worry Rich, as soon as you get anything like the wheels and bits of suspension on, you'll cheer up and it'll start to look a bit more hopeful. And it does look a lot better, and I do feel a lot more hopeful about it. We had a bit of help from our friend Steve doing this, and it's a good idea because we were getting into a bit of difficulty. It's all fairly straightforward to get these lovely little inboard shocks. It's quite a nice setup and quite a lovely little device for getting rid of the original strut and this little cut down operation here, which means we can bring it all into this form with this wishbone here. The important things to remember are, put this on the right way up, I put it on upside down, which would give you some rather odd steering geometry. And also, a complaint, I suppose, in that the bushes that go into here, there are metal sleeved rubber bushes that go inside this, are an incredibly tight fit. And the little diagram optimistically has somebody with a hammer tapping them in gently on a bench. I don't think so. Fortunately, we had access to an 80-ton press, which does lend a little much-needed persuasion to make the job a little bit easier. So the front is pretty much set up. We are still missing the steering rubbers to go in, the brackets that hold the steering rack and niggly bits like that, that will get tied down and sorted out today as work progresses. Late last night, the last thing we did was our other friend Darren came in and gave us a bit of a hand getting the loom sorted out. I mean, it's a custom-made loom for the car, so there's no messing around with an horrible, oily, greasy mess dragged out of something on a scrap heap, which is wonderful. But neither are the particularly comprehensive instructions. Having said that, it took him about half an hour to sort out what would have taken me about 4 hours. So that's all in place. We're going to knock that into the transmission tunnel. We've done it in a slightly different order here because we wanted to get the oily bits on first. Hopefully we're going to find that that doesn't give us a problem. Let's get my overalls out of the way. Rear suspension is in place. This is a doddle. This really is not a difficult job at all. Simply these two bolts here on either side of the chassis basically lift it up and off of the diff at the back with its bracket onto the mounting plate. Although the mounting plate didn't seem to be in quite the right place. And Jim, on the video that they sort of let you have a quick glance at to give you an idea of how it goes together, says you need to cut away a bit of the suspension in here. Well, we didn't. I don't know whether that means something's in the wrong place. I suspect it just means we've got a slightly different version of the rear axle assembly, but I don't think that's important. Rear springs more or less in place loosely. We've got to drop this and get those fixed in. The shocks are here. Bit of a temporary measure here because you do need washers to pad out the tops here where they're a bit loose in the bracket. But again, it's all more or less in place for us, so we can start threading the brake pipes around it. As I say, we're going to do those afterwards. The book kind of suggests you do it first, but now we've got everything in place, hopefully we'll know precisely where the pipes need to be located to do that. We hope. And that's progress so far. Day 3 begins, and we're expecting to see some big visible results today. We're getting towards getting it rolling, probably in the next couple of hours. Finish off the steering setup. We're getting there. We're feeling good. Stressful, isn't it? Where's my overalls? Let me explain something to you. Let's just step outside for a second. Things have got a little tense in here. You may remember that earlier on we were working on the rear suspension, and we wondered why Jim had told us to cut away part of it, and we couldn't see what needed to be cut away. It all seemed to fit perfectly. Then, being impatient as we are, we put all 4 wheels on the car, lowered it down to the ground, sat in it and thought, this is great, but it's very low at the back. Then we found out why. Because the Sierra suspension unit, where it fits, the 2 front mounting points have to be fitted on what we now realise is an obvious little place for it on top of the rear of the chassis, on the stressed points for it. That's why we needed to cut it away. That's why it was too low, because we'd fitted it at the bottom. And that means that now, well, we've got to put it back up on jacks, we've got to take all 4 wheels off, and we've got to put right our mistake. A lesson learnt, I think, in paying attention. But I would say this, it wasn't necessarily that obvious at the time. Here it is, the cause of our problems. This needs to be here. We put it here. Back to the drawing board for a bit.
Fitting the engine proved far easier than any of us ever expected. With the help of a block and tackle, a sealing joist and Steve's supervision, the complete engine and gearbox assembly was eased into place. The alternator fan does come close to the suspension rocker arm, but it tucks away neatly with plenty of clearance. Next, we drill out the holes to accept the engine mount, and we're there.